two people in the world who don't know who Dr. Sue is. She is an amazing energy healer. She's a master of bioenergetic healing. She dives deep into the quantum field. And she's just an all-around amazing person. And I am delighted and honored to call her my friend. So, Sue, welcome to In Conversation. We're going to do a deep dive on some secrets of energy healing. And,
absolutely.
you know, for anybody who doesn't know who I am, I'm Lynne McTaggart. I'm the author of 7 books. I'm an internationally award-winning journalist and author and bestseller. And I've been working on the power of intention and the use of intention and in small and large groups to heal yourself, each other, and the world. So we are going to talk about energy healing. So I want to ask you one question that came up actually yesterday, which is, I hear that a really important aspect of healing for you is having a person find their soul's purpose. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, absolutely. You know, I kind of describe it like when we land on this planet, we sort of splat. And in the splat, our mind goes one way, our body goes another, the spirit is just kind of hanging out, the breath doesn't know what to do. And we start making a way for ourselves, just the best we can do. And we develop a false sense of who we are, always responsive to the outer world, engaging in what we think we're supposed to be doing and saying and being. And so all of our circuits get oriented to the outer world. And it creates this false self, which many people call the ego. I like to call it the protective personality, because nobody likes to have an ego. At least no ego likes to have an ego. And so we live from this personality level. And the problem is it's not completely equipped with everything that we need, because it's not the whole of who we are. It's who we think we're supposed to be being. And a byproduct of that is we end up in a lot of pain. We end up not being able to heal ourselves. We end up not being able to know what we truly want, We just show up the way we think that we're supposed to. And so what I'm doing is always coaxing people back toward that true, essential, soulful self. So when the mind and the body and the breath kind of pull back together, now we're operating as our completed wholeness. And the power of the mind has a much bigger power when it's operating in conjunction with this authentic self and the true combination of the whole field that we are here representing. And so yes, when we can find a way for people to set their goals and their intentions and step out into life from a soul-based perspective, from a whole-based perspective, then the ideas that we come upon are going to be richer, deeper. They're going to speak to what our true life path is and what our soul purpose is on the planet. So spending some time dissecting that and discovering that is certainly a valuable effort for people to do, and ends up having a tremendous capacity to transform an energy field that has gotten used to operating on only some of its cylinders. When we are firing on all of our cylinders, our power to heal and our power to succeed is quantumly enhanced. So I'll stop there and see where you want to go.
Absolutely. No, that's so interesting. And it's got so many parallels too with some of the things that I do. First of all, I want to frame this by really assuring everybody that, we are hearing all the time about AI and the fact that humans need an upgrade. And I think what Dr. Sue and I are exploring and discovering is that we have extraordinary capacities that we have no idea that we have. I mean, we've been born with these capacities. They need to be flourished. They need to be taken care of and encouraged. But they are discouraged by all of our, all of the people we have in authority, all of the people from teachers to parents or whatever, discourage children or poo-poo the whole idea that we have extrasensory powers. But we see it all the time, Sue and I. And what I'm so interested about that whole soul purpose is one of the ways that I've found that is very protective against your own negative intention and also negative intention of others. And something I teach in my intention masterclass is the power of what's called a homing thought. And this is something that was told to me, mentioned by Dr. John Diamond, who is basically the real inventor of behavioral kinesiology. He was a psychologist and holistic practitioner who realized that not only toxic substances make your arm go weak when you're doing kinesiology, but so do toxic thoughts. And he found a great antidote to it, and it's something that I work on a lot with people, is the power of what you were put on this earth to do. And that is what reminded me so much when you were talking about soul's purpose, is that we're all put here for some amazing divine purpose, whether it is to become president of the United States or to bake the perfect chocolate cake. You know, it doesn't matter, but it's what connects you with the divine. And I find that whole idea of finding that essentially that essential thought is probably the most strengthening thing we have.
Absolutely.
So tell me a bit about, you know, the ways that you found are the most powerful to do remote healing.
So when we are gathering all of our faculties back together, which someone might say, well, what are my faculties? Well, stepping into one's authentic self is one of the most empowering things we can do. When we start to find, feel, and sense into, what do I really feel in this moment, in this situation? I'm in this conversation, I'm engaging with someone, I'm in this project and I'm performing in the way that I'm supposed to. Is it in true alignment for me? Is it what I really want to be doing? Is it what I really would love to be saying? How is it that I am withholding, suppressing, marginalizing my true authenticity in the course of a day? When someone begins to become aware of the fact that they are doing that, they stop doing it. It starts to inherently rearrange and realign. You know, deep inside of everyone's inherent soul purpose is to transcend that protective personality, to pierce right through it, to dissolve it, to allow what we've learned to be limiting beliefs that have created an encasement of who we are. When we learn that they can be shifted and transformed quite easily, if we know what to do, then suddenly this encasement, this cage, this box that we've been living in starts to melt. It starts to be absorbed by this power of the true loving presence that we are. And as we own that, as we claim it, as we can find it and start to breathe life into it, it becomes more and more potent and more transcendent itself. It becomes omnipresent. It starts to show up in every single thing that we do. When our intention is to heal ourselves or to heal others, and we know how to come back on to this soulful presence rather than trying to drive it from this level of the personality, it has an inherent universal, like cosmic power behind it. So that includes our ability to sense and perceive tiny nuances and insinuations and aspects of life that our personality wasn't trained to perceive. The personality was basically invented by us in terms of protection. Am I fitting in? Am I doing the right thing? Am I loved? Am I accepted? Is this going to work? Is it going to be okay for me? And all of that is a fear-based reality. So as we start to come back home to ourselves and recognize, hey, of course I'm okay. I am whole and complete. I was born of the unified field itself. I am the field compressed into a funnel, compressed into a channel, descending into this realm and rising as this presenting soulful self. And if I allow that to be true, then I inherently start trusting and believing these messages that are rising from the brain in my gut to the brain in my heart and arriving to the brain in my head in such a fashion that I can trust it. I know it. I feel it. Even if I don't have the evidence in the outer world yet, I know that this is true for me. And no one can take away from anyone what is true for them. It is a very empowered state. And when it's infused in love, there's no stopping it. So when it comes to remote healing and having an effect on our own energy field and the fields of others and the field across humanity, we need to learn how to operate in a manner that is grounded, that is integrated, and that is based in this soulful, authentic presence, not a performing personality or a protective personality who's just trying to do the right thing and trying to show up and be good and be accepted and be loved. We first have to accept inherently you are whole. You are made of goodness. And there is, when the thoughts land on that, we stop interfering with our connection to the rest of the field. And when we can participate in that kind of comprehensiveness, our power to heal each other and heal within is exponential and truly limitless.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Sue, when you're talking, I think about all the time that some of the work that I do with my husband, Brian Hubbard, who has created a system called Time Light. And the whole centerpiece of his idea is that our thoughts create us. The thought thinks the thinker is basically how he puts it. And so what we're really talking about is a central idea of who we are that is just based on an agglutination of thoughts and characteristics that people have put on us over the years. Many times you can have a teacher who said, you were pretty slow at math. And then that lands inside us and that we begin to believe it. I mean, I always tell the story of a guy called Sam Keen, who is a philosopher. And when he was a young boy, his mother had him try to do something mechanical and he couldn't do it very well. And so she said, well, you're pretty bad at this. And so that stuck. And he believed, I can't do anything mechanical. So he grows up and says, well, I'll become a philosopher. And he does, and he's a pretty decent one. But when he took a test as an adult, he discovered he was in the genius level for things like engineering. So I keep thinking, what amazing inventions was the universe denied because mom said that to him. And that's a lot of what happens with us, thoughts and words. I look at intention all the time, Sue, and I'm fascinated by the thoughts, the inauthentic thoughts, as you talk about, that end up controlling our lives. I just read a story about a guy from Tennessee who was told by his doctor that he had end-stage liver cancer. He had 4 tumors. So he was going to die before Christmas or just around Christmas. He made it through Christmas and died a few days later. So in the postmortem, they of course did an autopsy, and guess what? They found these were not cancerous. It was a tiny little tumor. It was completely benign. What killed him was the thought. And we see this, and we see the reverse of it all the time. The whole idea of thoughts, when you can free yourself from those kinds of judgments, those kinds of limitations, and understand how extraordinarily powerful you are, healing happens. Healing happens. And I have a woman in my master class who had stage 4 lung cancer. And her group did intention for her, and she discovered, and she wasn't able to do chemo or surgery. And nevertheless, it has completely reversed. There's no evidence of disease. It was just down to a group thought. So tell me a little bit more about how else do people sabotage themselves?
Oh, well, it is, completely appropriate that when we're stuck in this protective personality layer of our being, when we're out here in the false self, we are subject to the things that people say, the way that things go, the conclusions that we even start drawing on things from a place of lack. When we are identified as the mind alone, we are inherently feeling a sense of something's missing. something's wrong, what I'm incomplete, I'm not good enough, this is never going to work for me. And the reason for this is that the vibrational frequency of the thoughts alone is a different vibrational frequency than when the mind and the body and the breath, meaning this recipe for entire soulful presence, is available. When all of these aspects of us are aware of each other, the influences, the vibrational frequencies of these individual components of us start to have an influence on one another. So when the mind is connected to the heart, when the mind is connected to the body, able to perceive our deep, authentic wisdom, the mind starts processing differently. It becomes closer and closer to the alpha frequency, a natural state. It becomes available to possibility. It's easier for it to open up to receiving and to give unconditionally. And so what we're wanting everyone to realize is that the power of our thoughts is immense. And if we get so caught up in the kinds of thoughts that we were handed by the teacher, by the coach, by the parent, by the doctor even, if we get so caught up in those thoughts and stop paying attention to what we feel and what we know to be true, we become subject to the world of unattached thinking, meaning just errant thought processes. And in the presence of that, we start vibrating at a frequency that does not allow for healing. Healing happens in a certain radio station, if you will. And so what we're always wanting everyone to do, and Lynn, I know that you are so gifted with this, by bringing people together and allowing people to help each other, it automatically brings the heart essence into the power of the mind. And we're allowing people to be surrounded by a circle of 8 that is, for instance, that is giving to us. And so as we're receiving, we're actually intending that those energies come all the way into me, not just my mind and my thoughts and the ways that I'm thinking, but I'm opening and receiving, and I'm allowing that to happen. And so when you're doing the work that you're doing, it is allowing these aspects, these various components of an individual to find one another. And then the mind settles down. When the mind is in service to the soulful purpose, it is much more empowered than when the mind is thinking it's all up to me. I got to do this on my own. And so when it's in service to the soul, it's in service to something bigger than itself, it relaxes. It's like, oh, now I know what to do. Now I know what to do. I didn't know what to do before on my own out here. But if there's this nuance, this sense, this wisdom, this sixth sense rising in this individual, and I'm supposed to be in service to that, I can honor it. I can own it. You bet. We'll get together as this team and be much more empowered than when I'm asking myself to figure out this life and to figure out how I'm going to make it in the world and to figure out how to forgive things and how to get on with myself or rewrite the story that I was handed. When it's soothed by the power of others and the power of intention, the power of love and the power of authenticity, there's no stopping it. There's no stopping it, because that's what we came here to do. So I get so excited about your work, Lynn. I love
and vice versa, right back at you, girl. But I tell you, what you're talking about really are 2 things that are really central that I see. Number 1 is feeling a sense of oneness. And I have always considered this as something really important. And then I managed to do a study about it that demonstrated it, because what we found is that something about being in a group brings us, it's like a fast track to experiencing oneness. You know, we are all part of the quantum field, as you said. We're kind of a compressed version of it, but we live in the field. We live in the field. It's not like you enter the field. We live here. We're all part of it. Our subatomic particles are doing a little dance for the rest of the field. But we don't experience that. We experience isolation. We experience separateness. We experience life as that. And that is part of that whole difficulty and problem. I just read something really wonderful today that was talking about the human need to be in community. You know, that we need this probably more than we need food. It's so important that people who are lonely or isolated are more likely to suffer from cancer, stroke, or heart disease. But the researcher said, if we were in a zoo, it should say, do not house in isolation. And I just I loved that, because that's so much with what I see is something about experiencing an intention, an altruistic intention in a group is extraordinarily healing. Number one, because it creates an experience of oneness that we don't get to feel normally. And we've seen this with brainwave studies where we found that people doing power of 8 groups very quickly enter a state very analogous to a Buddhist monk in ecstatic prayer or a Sufi master in chanting, not meditation, something really different. So there is something about that group and also altruism that is really important. I also found some research, interesting research recently, showing that just doing something in a small group, just acts of kindness, so that would go into group intention. A researcher called Barbara Fredrickson found that activates, that little bit activates a whole healing system in the body that starts with the vagus nerve, which is the longest nerve in the body. It starts in the neck and it winds through all the major organs. And it turns on all kinds of healing elements, release of oxytocin, the love hormone, but all kinds of other things. It is super healing. And this is about the power of community, and why what I see is intention in small groups or even big ones can create healing. So tell me a little bit, Sue, about when you see people healing, you say they get into that state. When do you know? What do you see about a big transformation that's happening in them where you know they're going to be healed?
Oh, absolutely. So there is a pattern that each individual is operating as. I have actually a little image here. I just thought I could maybe just show this. Okay. So this is the biofield. This is how this quantum field compresses and generates this channel that hits the earth and rises up, and it cycles like this. It's called a toric field flow, and we're all flowing in this way, ideally. But most of us are flowing in some version of this, where the energy is rising, is descending down, hitting the earth, rising up through the body. This is measurable. Institute of Heart Math has done lots of work with this as well. And as it rises, it accesses aspects of our consciousness that we're allowing, and it diverts and deflects around aspects of our wholeness that we are marginalizing, that we've shut down. We were told that we're not creative. We were told that we're not mechanical. We were told that we're not this or that. And so we shut these things down. And then this rising energy has to rise in the way that it can, the path of least resistance. The wobble that it creates a distortion in the expression of our own personal version of the unified field. And that distortion has an effect. This individual stands here, looks out through a distorted field and sees a world that doesn't care, sees a world that doesn't work for them. It affects their ability to change their beliefs. When we gather, we're going to be next to someone who has maybe the opposite set of distortions, maybe the opposite yet again and again and again. And so collectively, we create a greater sense of harmony. We come to this when we begin to gather and hone and refine and begin to compensate really and assist for someone else's distortions. One person might feel that they're highly artistic. Another person might come from a place of being highly, bright and analytical with numbers. And when those two fields come together, there is a greater presence than either of them will experience alone. And here's the beauty of it. It's non-local. It's a vibrational radio station that we're dialing into with our beliefs about who we are. So someone on the other side of the planet, if I'm connecting with them consciously, I can sense and feel a greater sense of wholeness because of the connectivity. Now, this is just one simple way that those fields can interact, but here's what we know. When someone is dropping in, finding their own true authentic self and connecting with another who is doing the same with their intention, we meet in a vibrational frequency that is so refined. It's such a refined, high frequency version of who we are and the bandwidth of human consciousness, that there is a union that is occurring. And in that unifying presence, we get to experience a greater sense of our wholeness than when we're just over here isolated, getting consumed in our own thoughts and feeling the effects of our own distortions based upon those thoughts that keep, reoccurring and reoccurring and reoccurring. And so when someone finds a way to drop in, and the work that I do and the work that you do, of course, is training people how to do that, then what happens is that connection lands. It's a felt sensation. And what's happening is someone is actually developing their sixth sense and beyond in ways that they never were allowed to do in the upbringing that most people had. Most people were trained that if it's not real, if you can't see it, if you can't touch it, it isn't real. And so it's just your imagination, and that gets thrown under the bus. And those faculties are essential ingredients for us to actually allow for our wholeness to have a life here on this planet, because they are parts of us. And so when we start embracing them again, everything begins to change. And as that connectivity is absorbed and breathed through the body, the cells begin to, through this power of epigenetics that we are now aware of, these little antennas on the surface of the cells pick up on a different frequency, report new messages to the inner workings of the cells, and those cells start producing different chemistries. Those cells start performing in a different way based upon their current need. And when the perceived need changes because a greater sense of wholeness is here, then the chemistries of the body start to align. The flow of the body, the ascending and descending energies starts to align, and everything starts to perfect itself as it was intended. We were designed to be able to do this, but no one taught us how to do it until now. And I really think the times, on the planet are forcing us into finding another way of living. And I really feel, Lynn, like what you're doing in your work, and what the work of bioenergetics that I am doing and teaching people to master these things is, its time has come. This is the time for people to awaken to these powers like never before.
You bet. Hear, hear. So I couldn't agree more about it being the perfect time, because, we're watching our old way of life die. And my feeling about that is that's good riddance to it. Yes. And it is time to create something new. In fact, this isn't what I'm about this conversation, but I'm starting a thing called, I'm sure you've heard, the Great Reset. A lot of theories about how they're going to, reset the world and control from the top. Well, I'm going to start the People's Great Reset, because I think that big change has to come from all of us, and they can't do anything to us unless we participate. And if we choose to participate in a different way, I think that we can do the kinds of change and create the kinds of change that really need to happen. I want to pick up on some of the things you were talking about, because they're so important. Number one, you're really talking a lot about getting off of yourself, which is a little mantra that I've got all the time, particularly when people are really stuck. In my courses, in my master class, a lot of times when people are really just have hit a brick wall, I will say to them, get off of yourself and start intending for someone else in your group. Yes. 9 out of 10 times that really helps. I know a guy called Tony in my current year-long class. He had leg and foot pain for 10 years after an accident, and nothing was happening when the group was doing intention for him. So I just said, Tony, why don't you get off of yourself? And he started intending for someone else who had a foot thing, and all of his pain disappeared and has never come back. And that whole point about altruism and getting off of isolation, getting off of that rerun of tape, those internal tapes you're talking about, absolutely changes absolutely changes things. I mean, I see this a lot with my intention experiments, where we have somebody, we have thousands of people in getting involved in doing an intention for something altruistic, like lowering violence somewhere. We're going to have one upcoming one in probably in February or March. And what ends up happening is about 40% of the participants, because I surveyed them afterward, report having some sort of physical improvement, some sort of healing or whatever. And so I'm really convinced that this getting off of yourself, this altruism, this getting away from the sense of I, me, my, is possibly really central to energetic healing. What about you? Have you seen that in some of the, I mean, you see it because in healing, you have to do that if you're trying to heal somebody else.
Yeah, you bet. So there's a difference between thinking about myself and feeling my authentic presence and being my true self. And this is what you're saying, that when we can get into feeling badly for ourselves about the things that are happening in our lives or the things that are not happening in our lives. And we start kind of mulling that in a way that causes the field to continue to fold over on itself instead of flowing in the ways that we were just describing. And so the very best thing that we can do in that moment is move into service, move into flow, move into contribution, move into thinking about and feeling a connectivity and a possibility beyond this internal rumination that's happening, this chewing on oneself. And as we begin to fold that back out, we start to immediately start sensing and feeling and perceiving a different reality. And then the energies that are meant to be flowing bioenergetically are able to do what they are here to do. We see these types of miraculous healings all the time inside of our work, where I teach a remote healing course as well. And when we're aligning, even in the class while we're doing the training, people are having these experiences instantly because it's just an opening of a gateway. And this is what you're describing. And this happens. The gateway is closed or the gateway is open. And as soon as it's open, it's a different reality. It isn't that it takes a lot of time for us to learn what a power of 8 could do. It isn't that it takes a lot of time for these results to start happening. It's like the light switch is on or the light switch is off. And when we flip it on, there's a new natural inherent tendency for healing and wholeness and rectification and purification and perfecting that is inherent in the design of the cosmos. It wants to flow. It doesn't want to have pockets where the energy is imploding. It wants to be in motion. It by design is. And humans have the ability to pocket it off, to say, no, I'm not enough. That doesn't work for me. I'm not included. And a byproduct of that is an implosion that will occur because the universe just simply won't tolerate it. So what we're offering is a way for people to move into the flow that is meant to be. And a byproduct of that is healing. I find that when people start to celebrate wholeness and connecting with others is a way, that intentional connection and a shared come from that is of service and unity. When people can find pockets of that in this life, what happens is they begin to flow and flourish automatically because it is our divine design. And the light switches flip on, and instantly that which was trying to happen all along is able to happen. And people start experiencing, as a byproduct, healing happens. It's not that they're trying to go heal a problem. It's that they're focusing on connection. They're focusing on possibility. And they're focusing on, yes, I am and I can. And when those thoughts are amplified and magnified by others leveraging for you, it becomes impossible to stop. It has a transformational effect on your field in spite of itself and in spite of how long it's been holding the pattern that it's been in. It wasn't an accurate and true pattern. It was just the best we could do given what we were unknowing about ourselves or believing about ourselves. And so as we start to allow a greater truth to flow through us, meaning we're just not interrupting it, it starts to heal everything on every level, spiritually, mentally, emotionally. Everything physically begins to change as a ripple effect of this field being allowed to flow the way that it was intended to flow. We just have to learn how to get out of the way. And the fastest way to do that is to, find some pals that are going to do this with you. And it doesn't have to be someone you know. You can come together with someone you don't know is located on the other side of the world and have this go to work for you. And this is what I love, love, love about what you do to introduce people in this way.
So you've said so many wise things there. I mean, first of all, this whole idea about us not, living authentically is really about one of the key elements of why we don't live authentically is we live in isolation. That's been one of the real the most toxic thing about COVID, I think. But we do understand deep in our hearts that connection is the most important thing that human beings need. And when we do experience it, we do transcend all of the limitations of the way that we live. Now, one thing you also said is, it doesn't have to be someone in the same room. I mean, I've been experimenting a lot with the power of entrainment remotely, just as you talk about. Now, for instance, in the intention experiments I've done for the last year or so, I've been working with Dr. Konstantin Korotkov, who is a Russian physicist. And what we do is we have a focus on something, let's say lowering violence for the inauguration, the American inauguration. That was one of the ones we did, or lowering violence in some other area. We've been doing that for, as I say, for about a year and a half, while he sets up equipment in Russia. So we focus on our intention, but we also look at a picture of that equipment. And each time we have measured extraordinary changes. So, and what that tends to say is we are creating all the time through our focused intention, a psychic internet. Now, what I've also found in small Power of 8 groups, I mean, my Power of 8 intention masterclass, we put people into groups for a year. They don't live near each other. They may be in the same time zone, and we put people in the same time zone, but everybody meets virtually. And we've had people meeting for years. And they find that these people have become their intention family because suddenly they have a community to work on, and you see that they ultimately transcend that persona that is based in isolation, that is crippled by isolation. I mean, we had a guy this past year, Jerry, who had taken the year before class, and he said, because it was so healing for me to have a community during COVID, I felt a relationship with these people that was better and deeper than anything I had ever felt. So he joins the next year. He just takes it all over again, just to have another group. And I think that is what I think is so powerful about intention in a group. It is suddenly that experience of oneness, of community, of support, of people who have your back, of people who love you unconditionally, even though they started out as strangers and they may not see you ever in person. Most of our people don't. Some travel 500 miles or more to be together. But I think that is such an antidote to our way of life now. And I think that whole idea brings us back to that authentic self you talk about. And ultimately, as you say, brings forth the qualities that we have to heal ourselves and each other.
Absolutely. It begins to expand our territory that we feel we belong in. And as soon as that happens, there's more spaciousness in our own field. Instead of it being compressed and contracted and right here in this isolated space, there's more space between the particles. And in that spaciousness, when I connect across the miles even, I'm training my mind to allow a bigger territory that I belong in. And in that, the bigness of my newfound home, I allow the energies to flow through my own system. And when energy is moving, energy is healing. When energy is stagnant, things begin to collapse. and they collide, and in the cellular structure and function is unable to detoxify in the system the way that it's supposed to. And so as we create this expansion and we enhance it with our breath, one of the many things that I do inside of the Energy Codes coursework that I work with is just teaching people how to breathe properly in a quantum intention, and allow for that breath to fill this space. And so this is what's happening kind of automatically when we connect with a group of people and we have a common intention of service to one another, and we're holding that intention collectively. The space that we're operating from is bigger than this individual tiny space inside of my own home, especially at these times during COVID, where there is just such a, it's up to me kind of feeling. And it can be very defeating and very deflating and very concerning for someone to ever think that they're going to be able to make a change and to get a handle and have transformation occur in their lives. And we have a group of 5,000 people around the world that are coming together for this next year, in your Year of Miracles, for instance, that is helping each other in a similar way. But what I love about what you're doing is these small groups that are coming in where everybody is talking to each other and being able to land this and leverage the love and intention and presence of so many others at the same time on what it is that they're working with. So it's a beautiful thing you're doing.
Absolutely. Thank you. And what you're doing too, Sue, no question. So let's talk a little bit about trauma, early life trauma or other kind of trauma, and how energy medicine can heal that. I want to talk a little bit about what I've seen with the power of groups. So we had Annette this last year who basically felt her mother never loved her. Her mother had her as a teenager. I think she found it difficult to breastfeed, and Annette always felt really detached from her mother, like she wasn't getting the kind of maternal thing that she needed. So one of the things that I do too is intention out of time. And we worked with her on some of that, and it's amazing. Her mother's whole attitude to her and Annette's whole attitude to her mother completely changed. And there is a connection where there wasn't. So I was fascinated by this, Sue, and I started looking up things about attachment theory. And I found some amazing research demonstrating that particularly for troubled youth, where people, these kids have gone through really terrible, traumatized childhoods, that one of the big healers is a group. And it is that whole idea of the group support, of being out of that isolated self, that can help people to transcend and move into the space of healing. So even with attachment problems, we can see extraordinary healing, extraordinary movement. And this goes back to what you're saying about us not being these static entities that are our past, that we are dynamical, we're constantly changing, we're full of energy, and that energy can shift on a dime. It can shift in an instant. And we see these healings in an instant all the time as well. So tell me a little bit about what you've experienced with healing trauma.
Absolutely. Same. It is similar to this image that I was just showing us, that trauma can create some of these things that cause us to contract in certain ways, and it does, and it gets stored in subconscious memory. And if enough of those traumas are impacting us, there's a kind of a trap door, if you will, between the conscious and the subconscious, between areas of the brain, the thalamus and the hypothalamus, that if they're not talking to each other, we can look around in our outer world and see everything's fine. I should be feeling fine. I should be happy. I should be healing. I should be feeling whole, but I'm not. Something is just tugging away at me or just compressing me, and I can't put my finger on what it is. And it has to do with traumas in our past having had an impact. And if there were enough traumas simultaneously or one after another in this linear fashion in a short enough period of time, it can have an effect of slamming a trap door between those two areas of the brain, and the conscious and the subconscious are now not talking to each other. Synapses between the thalamus and the hypothalamus are not talking to each other in that moment. And then what happens is we're having this internal knowingness and these gut wisdoms and this authentic desire rise up, but it's never getting to our conscious awareness because the door slams shut and the messages can't get here. And so up above that door, we're having to think and do and analyze and process and make it all be a mental process. And the body and the mind aren't really able to work together in a way. And so this is a byproduct of trauma in a very big way. And as soon as we can get the trap door opening, then this inherent internal wisdom and the ability to heal rises to our conscious awareness. And suddenly we can feel what we need to do. We have a hunch about it. We can trust this wisdom that's rising. And here's what we know. Many things contribute to opening that trap door. Breath work contributes, meditation contributes, and loving into anything, being present with anything, being caring about other in a deeply heartfelt manner starts to open this trap door. Feeling a sense of wholeness and welcome reprieve, a sense of embrace, whether it's an emotional embrace from across the ocean or a physical embrace here. The moment that those types of messages are bombarding the system, the trapdoor starts to open, because that trapdoor, its intention is protection. And the moment that we feel connectivity, we feel less of a need for protection. And as soon as that soothed sensation is perceived, the trapdoor starts to open and healing is available for us, no matter what the traumas were. And that's the beautiful thing. Inside of that, we can operate collapsing time, operate beyond space and time. And this is what we're learning to do with remote healing on every level. Energy medicine and remote healing need to be brought together, rather than us thinking that we have to have hands-on in order to get these trap doors opening and the body starting to flow. And I think this is what this time on the planet is for in us. It's for us to recognize that we can do this. We can help each other do this, and we don't have to have it done to us only as through medications or through the ideas of hands-on healing only. Everything has its place, and this has its place as well. And so as the trapdoor is opening, traumas from our history and positions that we have held ourselves in, physiological states that have been present since the trauma, they start to shift and start to change immediately. And what we would call miraculous healings happen because nothing changed except the energetic vibration of the field sitting right here. Nobody came in the room and did something. Nothing happened on this physical level. I didn't take anything. I didn't get injected with anything. And here I am. It is different. And it's a rewrite. I've had this happen for myself personally. I had some trauma as a kid with some abuse from a family member, and I rewrote it not too long ago in a deeper level even. And what I recognized was in the pinnacle moment where things would have gone one way, I just offered it up for it to have gone a different way. And in my mind, it fluidly moved in a different direction. And instead of abuse occurring, there was an expression of divine love. And my physiology changed. I felt my own system relax. I felt myself sit back inside of this structure that I'm operating in, this vehicle called a body, differently. And muscle tension that I've had in my system all my life melted, and a perception of self rose up that even with all of the work that I have done in the course of my life was perfected yet again. So when you say that some of your students are repeating your programs, I have this in my community as well. It is accumulative. We build upon what we have learned before, and we're always releasing more and more and more. And the purpose of our life is to release to the point that there is this ultimate freedom where healing is happening the moment that it is needed. And healing isn't something we're looking for. It's something that we're living and breathing as a perpetual unfoldment as we're intended to be. So it's such a beautiful thing that we as a humanity are awakening to our power to harness this incredible power for up-leveling and perfecting and healing as a byproduct of us recognizing the truth of who we are.
Absolutely. Our own great people's reset.
Yes, I love that.
And upgrade. You know, we talked about that to begin with. I mean, I've seen it over and over again. Here's an interesting little bit of information, quantum information, which is we know we are all energy. We know that we're something a little bit more amazing than chemistry and electrical signaling. What we also discovered is the brain has no notion of time. There's no part of the brain that really understands time. The same place in the brain has information about past and future together and can confuse it. Now, what I find so interesting about that is when we use intention and transcend time, and certainly there is an enormous body of scientific evidence showing that there is no such thing as time as an arrow as we experience it. We create that, but it isn't real. It is one big smeared out now. And every physicist worth his salt will say the same thing. There's no such thing as time. So what we have, though, instead, are thoughts and experiences that we bring to the present. And they, as you say, Sue, they live through you in terms of muscle tension or feeling of lack or feeling of inability to do things. And I've also found in working with people many times with my Power of 8 groups is when we change that person's perception of what happened, so they reclaim their power essentially, because that is one of the problems we have with trauma. It is power lost. You know, we feel disempowered, and that becomes the tape that runs our life. When people can reclaim their power, and there's many techniques for doing that, they can heal instantly. So you talked about that, and you also talked about remote healing, which is so interesting because, as I say, we have to think about ourselves being energy. I've demonstrated many, many times, hundreds of times, and dozens of times with the intention experiment, that we do create a psychic internet. And that psychic internet also creates entrainment. So a small group takes about 16 to 20 seconds for things to entrain. That means think of two pendulums that start out swinging like this and they end up swinging like that. Well, that's what brains do. And a group of brains do the same. They start very quickly getting on the same wavelength. So there is no reason why people need to be in person to heal. Healing can happen over vast distances. We've seen it. I mean, I've done intention experiments where I was in Sydney, Australia, and the target of our intention was in Tucson, Arizona, and we had a huge effect, our audience. So it doesn't have to be around the corner. It doesn't have to be in the same room. It just needs to be a focus, an intention, and that power can alter configurations, energetic configurations. And I think that's what we're talking about with Sue. What you do too is this altering energetic configurations, the layers of falsity that are false energetic configurations. And so what we're really kind of talking about, and that is so exciting about this time, as you say, is it is the time for us to step into the truth of who we are. It is the time of us to move away from all of the disempowering thinking that we've had landed on us because of COVID and so many things going on, and to embrace the time of big, big change. So
Yeah.
I want to ask the audience for some questions and throw some questions at you, Sue, if that's
Sure,
okay.
sure. Absolutely.
Okay, we have a
Right.
lot of people on our webinar who have been writing in, so let me see these and I'll fire them off back and forth. And anybody who has a question, please write it in the Q&A section on the webinar. That is the easiest way for us to read. Okay, so okay, how about Andrea? This is for you, Sue. How much damage do we do when we get triggered and fall back into negative feelings and thoughts, even if it's a few minutes before we move back to positive, and are grateful for being able to notice and correct the pattern? Any thoughts?
You know, the power of self-compassion, the power of self-love is truly transcendent upon that moment. So the moment that you recognize I've been triggered and I'm pulled back into this thing and I'm reliving it and it's right here, you know, the question is, am I doing damage again to myself? We are recreating, we're tapping into the pattern of distortion that creates inflammation, that creates cellular breakdown. And the moment that we're aware that we're doing that, it stops. And if we can be compassionate to the fact that this is part of the healing process, that I go back and forth across the line, that it's actually part of healing, it starts to allow an authentic healing deeply from within the crevice that got created from the original traumas that started us into living in a way that we would get triggered in the first place. So not to beat yourself up for having gone back in there, we go back and forth across the line. If you think of, like, if you had a piece of paper and you drew a line with a pencil down the middle of it, and then you took an eraser, and every time you were on track and thinking the way you're supposed to and feeling great, you're on one side of the page. And every time you get triggered and you fall off the wagon, you're on the other side of the page, and you draw the eraser across it. And then you remember, oh yeah, I do have the power to do this. And you go back to the other side of the page. And then you forget and you get triggered and you go back and forth and back and forth. Eventually we erase the entire line between these ideas of being on board or off board with being able to heal. Healing happens with authentic, loving presence to the self. When we are loving into the self in these sort of ways, the triggers, the pathways, the neurocircuitry, synapses that are firing together that keep us in this distorted state, they are healing when we flood it with self-love, self-compassion, when we are available. And when we are doing that with a community of people, it's empowered even more. So you are not re-injuring yourself. You're going back to pick up more, to embrace, to love into this present moment. And the more often we allow that to happen without an opinion about it, the more readily it will infuse into the quantum presence of self-love. And that's what it's all about.
Brilliant, brilliant. And that leads into a question that I'll take from Shashi, I think it is. What responsibility do we have when we're interacting with and towards others when we are being true to ourselves? Well, it's not an either or, Shashi. I mean, that's the interesting thing about it. When we're being true to ourselves, our natural state is to be altruistic, connected to others, compassionate, loving, everything that Dr. Sue and I have been talking about. So when we have that, that also creates a healing system that is true to ourselves as well. So it's not either or. When we start focusing on other people, what I have found over and over again, when you intend for others, you yourself experience a rebound effect of healing. Many, many people in my Power Bait groups and my master classes and courses find that as soon as they get off of themselves and start intending for someone else, they also experience healings. Now, it's not just excuse me, healings in, physical healings, but also healings in their lives. And I think that's something we haven't spoken about yet, Sue, which is healings. When healings happen at least we've seen it in Power of Eight groups, they are healed relationships. People heal their careers. I have a woman in this year's course who wanted to move away from the corporate world and find a more authentic work. And she suddenly landed a job with 2 charities helping Afghan refugees and absolutely adores it. We have other people who have looked for their homing thought, their divine purpose, and have asked for an intention for that. And amazing things have come through. I have a guy called Tom who wanted to set up a holistic clinic in Mexico, and it all just fell into place when he started intending for other people. So that whole idea of altruism is such an important piece, because it really does bring us back to our authentic selves. So let me see we've got lots of questions for you too. Let's see. What are your views about the healing power of the hands, Sue, says Ed?
Well, the healing power of the hands is infinite. There is a tremendously high frequency energy that is concentrated actually in the hands and the feet. And it is an energy that is equivalent to the electric body of energies, like where thoughts come from, the electrical aspect of the electromagnetic presence that is being human. We are both electrical and magnetic, and there is a tremendous amount of this electrical field that is able to be perceived and able to be transmitted through the hands. And so when we raise our hands to connect with others, or when we are raising our hands to receive from others, it influences this bioenergetic field tremendously. The electromagnetism starts to be upgraded and up-leveled to the pure raw energy, not just the energy that's been translated through our thinker. So when we're just open to receiving, for instance, we're able to receive a higher frequency energy than if we are trying to think our way into our value and our worth and our ability to belong or to heal something. When we kind of once the intention is set, if we just kick into complete receptivity, the energy that is able to be exchanged is beyond what we believe. That's where kind of the miraculous can occur, or this uncanny healing that was unanticipated, or this non-local capacity for us is experienced. So I feel that the hands play a huge role. That's why hands-on healing has been what it has been for the millennia. And what we also know is that there is a version of this that is not required to be a hand placed on someone. It can be a hand opened to the possibility of a particular vibrational frequency being a radio station that we are connecting across the globe. Just like what Lynne was saying earlier, that it is non-local. It's like a radio station that we find, and now we're participating in this this frequency that encompasses the globe. So we can truly have an effect on anyone that is dialed into that frequency. And the hands are a way that we are able to focus that energy even more so. Our mind and our hands and our hearts are a beautiful combination of working together with refracting this energy in such ways that it has a potent ability to land in specific frequencies that we're interested in.
Brilliant. I'm going to answer some smaller questions about Power of Eight groups, et cetera, et cetera. So, and I'll put them all together. So Sharon said, and I bet you'll agree, Dr. Sue, Sharon said she's done work with Power of Eight groups, and she's done your work too. And she seems to want to put it together. And I always recommend people don't do that, because all I know is what works, what we've measured works with Power of Eight groups. And I'm sure you see results in the work that you do. So here's my suggestion to Sharon. I don't know if you think the same thing, Sue. Do them both separately. You know, the Power of Eight group is really working on a group dynamic, a group sense of unity. And Dr. Sue has talked a lot about how her work operates. And so I would just recommend you do it separately. It all works. Just don't try to mash it up together, because we don't know. For instance, with meditation, people say, well, can I meditate and then do Power of Eight stuff? Well, we know from brainwave studies that meditation creates a completely different brainwave signature than a Power of Eight group. So we don't know whether that turns into a big mashup, you know? So I just recommend we don't do that. Somebody else said, does it have to be 8? No, it doesn't. It works with 6, it works with 12, as long as it's not a big and unwieldy group. And also somebody else said, how do I find out more? You can find out more. My Power of Eight Intention Masterclass is kicking off on the 5th of February. And there's information about it in the chat today, and also on my website, lynnmctaggart.com. I also have a Connecting and Healing Through the Power of Eight. If you just want to set up a Power of Eight group and advertise it for, there's a page on Facebook, Connecting and Healing Through the Power of Eight. I also have my community, where you can just set up and advertise for other people to just join your Intention Power of Eight group in your time zone. So it's working with me is taking one of my courses. You can do that too. And that's the Power of Eight Intention Masterclass, the year-long course that we're about to kick off. So let's see. Okay, what's your view on angels, Dr. Sue?
So I feel that there is a continuum of states of consciousness, levels of consciousness that go from this individual landing pad that we are operating as a human being, all the way to the highest self state of consciousness that exists. So I go into that kind of stuff a lot. And I don't feel that it is a separate realm from us if we allow it to not be a separate realm from us. And so I know that the angelic realm and the aspects of sentient consciousness is completely there and available and in a constant state of assistance. I know this from personal experience, which is kind of a different topic than what we're talking about here, but an opening in consciousness and awakening that I had 20 years ago. And many of my processes became a necessity. The things that I teach in the world were how I embodied and came back into this physical realm with a higher functionality. After this opening and awakening, I devoted 10 years of my life to figuring out what was that and what am I supposed to do with what I experienced. And now I experience it regularly because I've learned how to and teach others how to build the circuitry to perceive such things. So in between here and there are these realms of the angelic, the archangelic, the supportive states of consciousness that we would call guides, spirit guides, etc. And inside of what we're speaking about here, all of this exists. It's just a matter of what is our come from, what do we relate to, what matters to us. And my invitation to you would be to include yourself in that realm, to include the angelic realm, to be a part of your own consciousness as well. Because if we're the unified field, there is nothing that we are not. And therefore, we have the ability to relate at that level of consciousness just as well. So the angels, the archangels, the elementals, the spirit guides, the things that people call to for support and help in moments of need or in celebration are aspects of the oneness that we're speaking of. So if we can not make it separate from us, it's very helpful. Now, the way that most human beings do so, or some facsimile of that, is they pray for help and then they receive it. And so in a flash of a moment, they're opening a doorway between those realms. And and it works beautifully. I feel that people could open to that on a more consistent basis, and not only have to utilize that in times of great need, but to actually start to operate on those higher states of consciousness as well. Kind of a bit of a different piece of the conversation than where we are today, but what if it weren't, right? What if it could all be involved in this power of intention? And what if it was all one thing? And what if there was only one of us here and we were just tapping into all those parts of our true state of consciousness? And so it's quite an exciting adventure and inquiry that I love to infuse science into, Lynne loves to infuse science into, and we also have to remain open to the possibility of the experiences that science cannot explain. I personally have had loads of those, and so I honor it all, and I love to weave it together in conversations like we're having today.
You bet. You know, Dr. Sue, I completely underscore that. I have found over and over again with our Power of Eight groups, when people talk about the experience that they had during the 10 minutes, that's all it ever is. We've had people say there were light beings behind us, each of us, and this is in an in-person group of 8, as though they were the magnifiers and they were, you know, helping us. I had someone else, a woman called Sandy, who was due to have a knee operation, and her knee was so wobbly she couldn't even walk on it. And she said during the Power of Eight group, so this is a group of people in a circle holding their hands. Nobody's touching her other than her hands. She said during it, she felt warm mitts enclosing her knee. And afterward, she did a deep squat, something she hadn't been able to do for years. So that kind of healing in her mind and in many others was assisted by someone from something from another realm. So I hear that all the time. I also hear people saying there was some energy, a higher vibration in that room, or I felt a kind of connection to source that I haven't felt. So I am very much a believer, number one, that science can't explain everything. You know, I can explain about 90% of what goes on in a Power of Eight group. It's, you know, it's intention. It's the group effect. Groups create a collective effervescence. It is the power of altruism and being in there and love and all of those things. And then there's about 10% that's magic, where we see extraordinary things and transformations happen in 10 minutes. So, you know, healing in an instant. So I am completely open to some of these ideas. And I think they are, you know, what we have to do is enlarge our idea of what it means to be human. And that we are as you say, if it's all one, well, we have access to all kinds of energies. And, you know, there's plenty of evidence. Also, I mean, Dr. Korotkov, that Russian physicist, has done work on cadavers showing that they're still emitting light many days after the person has passed. And we have so much near-death experience information to talk about meeting entities from other realms during near-death experiences. So nothing can be counted out.
Yes, I was raised in a scientific household. My father was a pioneer in energy medicine, and so we were always in this conversation. And then I had this big opening about 20 years ago that just kind of even blew the doors off of this cutting edge conversation of possibility in terms of energy medicine and how thoughts create our reality, et cetera. It just was another realm that I was suddenly awake in. And so I know from personal experience that these things are not only a possibility, they are happening all the time. And it's a matter of us attuning ourselves and in training ourselves to be able to perceive and collaborate and work with this greater and greater and greater reality all the time. And so when we come together and hold in a nested sort of way in these groups, it allows for a stability for us to open to the possibilities of more and more and more of this field working through us personally and having the outcomes that we are in our hearts intending. And so I know from experience that it's not just, like maybe we could entertain some of that. It's like, I had no choice. I was there. I visit there regularly. So it's kind of wild to try to weave that together with a scientific conversation. But I guess it's time for humanity to learn how to do that, because here we are.
You betcha. And, that's the thing. We are so egocentric in our idea that we've explained it all, and I always say science is just a story. And new chapters come along all the time that rewrite the chapters that came before. We haven't gotten an idea about most of how the universe works. So we must be open to all kinds of ideas, and this is the perfect time for it. So we're going to just do one or two more questions. Somebody asked if you could elaborate a little bit more on healing your own trauma. Can you be a little more specific about that? Is that possible? But what thoughts did you have? And I can also talk about how we do it with our Power of 8 groups.
Sure. Well, the one thing that I always try to impress upon people when I have, more of a time to go into a conversation about it is that there is this idea that has been very true in my life, that there is good in everything that is occurring, that there is expansion and evolution occurring, and that what happens in this universe is actually happening in favor of me awakening to the greatness of my being, instead of being trapped inside of this personality that has these defects or these imperfections or what have you, that I can drop deeper into a true soulful presence that is whole and complete, and that everything that is happening in the course of my lifetime is pointing me or pushing me in the direction of realizing that, of accepting it on some deeper level than I was able to before. And so when things happen that are traumatic, they have in my life caused me to pull in. Now, previously, I didn't know that when I pulled in, I could actually discover an authentic soulful self. I just thought I was pulling in to protect myself. And so if I pull in the midst of trauma, and while I'm in here, I realize, oh, I'm in pretty good company. There's some amazing stuff in here. What happens is I start to recognize that there is this constancy of always trying to awaken us to a greater version of who we are than we thought we were. And so if we can come to it, and I write about that in my book, The Energy Codes, and if that would be helpful for you, but if we can come to every situation realizing that as hard as it was, or as painful as it was emotionally or physically or mentally or all of the above, if there was some aspect of it that was actually operating in my favor, then it becomes much easier to heal the idea of our past. That if I could direct my attention toward reinterpreting it from a perspective that was helping me discover a bigger version of me, then now it's not this horrible, ugly thing that I have to try to make a comeback from. It changes in my perceptive field, and then it becomes more malleable, and I can start to see and sense and feel it from a different perspective. So I would recommend, entertaining that idea. And it's a big one for a lot of people. How could this be in my favor? How could that be? And I'm inviting you to just, surround yourself with some people who are also willing to, hold it as that, and to allow you to discover that there is a huge version of you that you were never going to find if you hadn't been through that set of circumstances that caused you to pull away and get yourself together. And so in that, there's a rewrite that starts to happen. There is a reconfiguration of how we hold that thing in our history. And as we reconfigure it and bring it to this present moment as something that is more in support of us, rather than something that was just trying to beat us down, now we start to step into this realm that Lynne and I are speaking of today, that it's this realm of infinite possibilities. And I don't have to lose myself even if I rewrite that history. And in fact, I'll find a bigger version of myself in the process. So really, I mean, I could just go on for hours on this one, but hopefully that's helpful for allowing a bit of a reframe to allow some breathing space and a new sense of discovery for you.
I think that was brilliant, Sue. I really do. And it's such an important point to get, that our experiences, as you say, invite us to become a bigger version of ourselves, our negative experiences. And that's so hard to understand. But I had a doctor once when I was not very well in my early 30s who said, you know, the problem is you don't have the benefit of a rear view mirror to see why this has happened to you and how you're going to benefit from it. And now one of the great things about getting older is you've got a longer and bigger rear view mirror, and you can see
Right.
how everything
Right.
in your life that seemed to be a setback was the best thing that ever happened to you.
Yeah.
Now that sounds terrible when you talk about trauma, etc., but sometimes trauma can create that opening, that awakening, that understanding, that compassion. And now a very quick thing, what we do with trauma is, as I say, we move out of time. And then we deal with, we have a method of helping people take back their power, not by negating what happened, but by acknowledging what they wish they could have said, how they really feel, and allowing, even if they were a child or whatever, to really speak their truth. And so when that happens, that I've seen over and over again is extraordinarily healing. And it breaks my heart, because one of our retreats and courses we do, Intention in and Out of Time, is all about healing trauma. And I do it with my husband, Brian Hubbard, who healed his own childhood abuse as well through a system he created. And whenever we talk to people and we say, here are the 15 adverse childhood events, you know, there's people raising their hand for everything. You know, their parents raped them, et cetera, et cetera. And it is so heartbreaking to see the pain in the world, but also then it's an obligation we have to work on healing that. So I'm going to answer my final question, which is, somebody said, what's your homing thought, Lynn? I guess, what's your own homing thought? And I guess mine is, I was put on this earth to communicate through books, through speaking, and broadcasting. And also I was put on this earth to try to contribute to healing the world in whatever little fashion I can do. So that's probably mine. And I invite you to write your own. But Dr. Sue, it's been so great to chat with you. I want to just ask you, what have you got going on now you want to tell everybody about? You mentioned your courses, your book, everything. Tell us.
No, we have
everything, how they can get hold of you.
We're always cooking on so much. There's just this flow, this constant flow of translation that comes through this channel that has just kind of opened up as my life. So we do have a course coming up in February that is a new thing that I'm doing, which is Love and the Quantum Self. And it's an easy entry point of, just kind of checking out what this conversation is all about and how we can begin to engage in our power to heal and our power to understand the truth of who we are and to put that in motion. So Love and the Quantum Self is coming up in February, and you can find it's coming up the weekend before Valentine's Day. Now, I'm not speaking about love as a sentiment. I'm talking about it as a quantum tool. I'm talking about as a healing device, and how we can live as that vibration and start to sense and feel this authentic self that we've been speaking about today, so that we can put that one in motion in our lives and let that be the one that's living this life that is happening. And, so many things. I have the book, The Energy Codes. I have all kinds of coursework that is constantly unfolding. And you can check it out on my website, drsuemorter.com. It's drsuemorter.com. And there is lots there for you. My dear friend, Neil Donald Walsh, our friend, you know Neil as well. Lynn will be joining me on the Love and the Quantum Self. piece that is happening February 11th and 12th. So that'd be a nice place for people, easy place for people to check out more about this conversation and what's working. So you know, much love to you, Lynn.
Fantastic. And you got to check out Dr. Sue's stuff.
Yeah.
He has so much fabulous stuff. And for me, I am running my Power of 8 Intention Masterclass. It's kicking off on February 5th, and it's a year-long course. We do 6 weeks of intention boot camp, 2-hour live sessions, live and interactive. And then we put you into groups in your time zone and you meet virtually for a whole year. I'm also offering monthly intention clinics so I can help keep you on course, help you and coach you in really using intention in your life for relationships, for manifesting, for changing your career, your health, your finances, your relationships, and even your life's purpose. And we also have a community of people who will be on the masterclass who you can correspond with and talk to on our own community site, so you can really compare notes. But where we find the major change is when people consistently meet through the year. When that happens, pretty much 100% of the people involved in this have major, extraordinary change. So it's about putting in that time, but you'll see the benefits. So if you're interested in taking a course with me and the masterclass, check it out on lynnmctaggart.com. Look at the chat. If you're on Facebook, we're writing information about it, and just see what's going on there. And of course, I have my books, my 4 books in this area. Latest one, The Power of 8. I'm cooking up another one, and we have courses throughout the year. So it has been such a delight, as always, Dr. Sue. One of my favorite people in the entire world, everybody. So do check out everything about her.
Yes, and my community is a big fan of yours, Lynn. So lots of our folks are doing your work too, and I love to hear about that. So all the best to you on your launch, and I hope all the right people around this world find you and find your work this year and can dive in and find the healing and the wholeness that is so very wanting at this time and ready to evolve. So thank you for what you're doing, Lynn. It is such a joy to watch it and to be a part of it and to just be able to connect with you here today as well. Always.
Thank you so much. And I am mesmerized by the stuff you do too, Dr. Sue. So everybody, thank you so much for being part of this conversation. And it is recorded, so you can check it out on Facebook. If you're part of my community, we'll be sending it to you as well. So take care now and be well. And remember, your thoughts can change you, your life, everyone else's life, and even the world. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye for now.